His inability to speak, his inability to follow a maze with a pencil is a tragedy in his body. No, that is not it at all. Disability is created when classmates, when people like me don't seek to include people like Jess, when we don't engage our curiosity and find ways to connect with people.
Fuel your hustle with protein-packed, flavor-stacked Roller Bites. These compact handheld snacks deliver bold taste and real protein, so you can stay full, focused, and moving. No mess, no slowdown. Big flavor, clean fuel, and the kind of bite that just works. From long days to late nights, Roller Bites are ready when you need them in flavors like Tequila Lime, Monterey Jack, and Buffalo Ranch. Grab them at your nearest convenience store or catch them on tour. Visit rollerbites.com for dates, locations, and more.
There's a fire inside you can't ignore. Stand still? Not a chance. You're a lifelong learner who's come this far. Now, we're here to help you keep going further. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hey guys, welcome to Giggly Squad,
a place where we make fun of everything, but most importantly, ourselves.
I'm Paige DeSorbo.
I'm Hannah Berner.
Welcome to the squad.
Giggly Squad started on Summer House when we were giggling during an inappropriate time.
But of course, we can't be managed.
So we decided to start this podcast to continue giggling.
We will make fun of pop culture news,
we're watching,
fashion trends, pep talks where we give advice,
mental health moments,
and games and guests.
Listen to Giggly Squad on Acast or wherever you get your podcasts.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
Welcome back to the Neurodiversity Voices Podcast. Today we're exploring a question that touches every one of us. What does it truly mean to belong? My guest is Carmen Farrell, a writer, advocate, and mother whose journey began not in a classroom, a boardroom, or a conference hall, but in the everyday experiences of raising her son, Jess. What started as a search for answers about her son's development eventually became a profound rethinking of disability, inclusion, and the ways our communities either create barriers or create belonging. In this conversation, Carmen shares deeply personal stories about navigating medical systems, challenging assumptions about disability, and discovering that inclusion isn't about changing people to fit existing spaces. It's about changing spaces so everyone can participate, contribute, and matter. You'll hear the remarkable story of Club G, a student-led initiative that transformed an entire school community. And we'll explore the powerful concept of mattering, the idea that every person needs to feel both noticed and valued. Whether you're a parent, educator, employer, advocate, or simply someone who wants to build stronger connections with the people around you, this conversation offers practical wisdom and a powerful reminder that inclusion benefits all of us. So settle in for a thoughtful and inspiring discussion about disability, belonging, community, and what happens when we choose curiosity over judgment. Let's get started. Carmen, when people hear your advocacy work today, what's one thing they might be surprised to learn about where your journey began?
Well, the story that comes to mind immediately is the story of my failed mothering. I'd taken my toddler, Jess, to a play class, and it was one of those gym classes where kids clamber over, foam tubes and things like that. And he wanted to go in this foam tunnel, but he wouldn't go. So I thought, okay, good mothers push boundaries. And so I was nudging him to go in the tunnel, and he was still kind of wavering at the tunnel. And then I gave him a really good nudge, and the poor kid went sailing into the middle of the foam tunnel, and that was it. He started wailing. I felt like the meanest mother in the world. And that was the end of that play class. But I realized that something was up with him because he wanted to go in the tunnel, but he didn't. And I was left with the question, why?
Take us back to those early years. What was life like as you searched for answers about Jess's development?
Well, I mean, I think that any parent who is raising a child that is different and doesn't I describe it as kind of a square peg in a round hole. It's like, your intuition as a parent is that something is off, you need to do something, but the typical things, the things that are in parenting books, none of that helps. And so I felt like Jess needed more than what his older sister was getting. And at the same time, the medical system had got engaged. And so we were back and forth to Children's Hospital pretty much every week. And Jess was poked and prodded and squeezed and tested. And nobody could come up with any answers about what was going on with him. And as a mother, I worried of what this was doing to him psychologically. Was he learning that, people in white coats are scary and that being with mom means we're going to this scary place? So it was really isolating because nobody around me was having experiences like that. So there was nobody to talk to about it.
What was the most difficult part of navigating the medical system?
Well, I quickly realized, it was interesting because, as long as my child was excelling, growing well and doing all the things that, developmentally the child should be, I was fine with developmental standards. But the minute it was suggested that my child wasn't meeting developmental standards, I became defensive, partly because I had accepted that narrative that disability is unfit, disability is not desirable. And I felt like my child was constantly being evaluated, not as a beautiful, blue-eyed, curly-haired toddler boy, but as a set of behaviors and test results in a folder. And so, it was very easy to kind of be reactive against this broken paradigm. The medical model of disability is that it's a health condition and that it needs fixing and diagnosing. So it really broadcast this kind of broken message to me about my son.
How did professionals frame disability at that time?
It was, people can be thoughtless. And, I recall being told things like, look at how he walks. That's not normal. Um, that's, you know, everything that he did wasn't desirable. And in fact, there was even one time when I think it was in the genetics department, and the doctor wouldn't even meet my eye, but he said, while we're doing all these tests, which they called the $1 million workup. I mean, we're talking very esoteric tests, hundreds of them, samples sent off to far off labs that, would take months for results to come back. He said, while we're doing all this work, and it would be a good idea not to have any more children while we figure this out. So to me, that was a shocking statement. It was it's a eugenic statement. Like, we don't want you to reproduce more children like your son. So, so it was harsh. I'll be honest.
When did you begin questioning the idea that Jess needed to be fixed?
Well, that was a slow process because at the same time that all the medical investigations were going on, they also said, okay, get him in to see an occupational therapist, get him, see a physiotherapist. Then we added speech therapy. So there was quite a rigorous program of therapy that went parallel to all the medical investigations. And this went on for years. It went on for years intensely leading up to when Jess was in elementary school. And I really bought into that myth, I suppose, that okay, well, a condition exists, so let's maximize his potential and help him be all that he wants to be and can be. So that idea, that therapy idea about disability, about fixing it, like, there was a lot of behavior therapy because he received a designation of autism when he was 4. And I never really felt like that never explained Jess, but it was a way to get support for him once would be going into the school system. So I think it was around the time that I started to question, like, he is who he is. Like, why are we trying to sand off the edges of him to make him more acceptable to who? Like, he is who he is.
And how did your perspective evolve over the years?
Um, it evolved a lot when he was in elementary school, and to be honest, it was his friends, his peers had played a really big role in my waking up to a new way of looking at disability and how Jess operated in the world. And I'll do that by telling the story of he was in grade 3, and we had done a lot of work. We being our family had done a lot of work to hire therapists to go into the classroom when Jess wasn't there in kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2, to help Jess's classmates understand what some of the things that he might be dealing with. For example, Jess had physical, intellectual, and social disabilities. When he was little, it was really the physical disabilities were the most sort of prominent, I suppose. And so the consultant would do things like um, give the kids oven mitts and a regular pencil and ask them to trace in a maze, a regular maze. And they found that really hard, to hold a pencil with oven mitts. And the consultant explained, like, Jess's brain is telling his muscles to do these things, but his muscles aren't listening well. So then he gave the kids fatter pencils and mazes with wider lanes, and the kids had more success. So they kind of understood some of the challenges, and they also understood how adaptations could be helpful. So we've done a lot of this legwork, and Jess had a group of friends who often came to the house, and it seemed like he had a group of friends that cared about him, and he was a part of that. But I had a car full of groceries, and I was driving by the back of the elementary school one day, and it was recess time, and I slowed down just to see if I could see either Jess or his older sister on the playground. And my heart broke because I saw Jess, and he was standing against the chain link perimeter fence, and his fingers were laced through the fence on either side of his face. And he was just kind of staring blankly out at the street. And, my mother's intuition just, I just knew that, he wasn't crying, he wasn't upset, nobody was bullying him, but his face had this overwhelming kind of like, where did everybody go? And I kind of look. So I gathered my sister and realized that I needed to approach the school and try to get them engaged around helping Jess be more socially integrated with its peers. But I didn't want to come at them with this, like, you're not doing it right, and sort of all that emotionality. And so, I took a few days and I really tried to think about how would I want to be treated if I were someone in the school. So I kind of approached them with that mindset, and together over a period of time, we built up a plan to ask the children about their ideas and thoughts, how to change the playground games. And initially it was how to change the playground games to include Jess. But the kids were very quickly framing that request as how to include everybody. And so they named it Club G after Jess. His name begins with a soft G. And Club G became kind of a catalyst for radical inclusion throughout the school. It was a place where anybody could kind of feel not judged and participate. And they adapted, traditional games of like tag and California kickball and ones like that to just make the playfield smaller, make the game move a little slower so that it just could be more successful. And the kids really developed this sense of empowerment, and you could really see it on their faces how excited they were about the teaching and that kind of thing. And watching them go through this was a profound realization to me that Jess's way of being in the world, value judgment for them. My generation would see, look how awkwardly he runs, or He doesn't speak, he uses augmentative communication. How does that work? These kids didn't see that at all. Difference to them, and just as differences included, were like being short or tall or having brown hair or black. So, so that really shifted completely.
You've said that one of the biggest shifts in your thinking came when you stopped seeing disability as something wrong within a person. You often say that disability is created through the ways we treat one another. What do you mean by that?
Well, that was something that, again, I observed with the children, like going back to Jess in kindergarten. And part of the reason why we hired the behavior consultant was to create a more favorable environment for Jess, one that would be more supportive in drawing him out. Because what was happening was he was happy to sit in the corner with a matchbox car and roll it back and forth on the carpet, or turn it upside down and spin the wheels. And, he was content. He wasn't bothering anybody. And one way of looking at disability would say, oh, look at that individual in the corner. He's in the classroom. He's in the regular classroom, and he's happy doing his thing in the corner. And that actually is not inclusion. I mean, some people talk about the difference between inclusion and integration. I mean, that scenario is a result of legislation that has said, okay, in British Columbia schools, you will have, these kinds of students in the regular classroom. But, but, but a more, disability. So, and in that paradigm of like integration, Jess in the corner by himself, Jess's disability is in his body. His inability to speak, his inability to follow a maze with a pencil is a tragedy in his body. No, that is not it at all. Disability is created when classmates, when people like me don't seek to include people like Jess, when we don't engage our curiosity and find ways to connect with people. So that academics call it the social model of disability. And it speaks to disability being housed in our interactions. I am equally capable of creating disability if I am being exclusionary, or, if, like, when Jess encounters, a public space that isn't welcoming, that creates the disability. It's not how Jess's body is in that space. It's the space itself doesn't include disability and isn't, diverse friendly, if you will.
There's a fire inside you can't ignore. Stand still? Not a chance. You're a lifelong learner who's come this far. Now, we're here to help you keep going further. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Here's a tip for you. There's a podcast out there with fans waiting to be your next customer. They tune in every week, they trust the host, and that host wants to talk about brands like yours in their own words to their audience. The problem is, you just haven't been introduced yet. We're Acast, where that introduction happens. As the world's largest podcast marketplace, we let you browse shows, see who's listening, and book HostRed's sponsorships or run your own ads all from one platform. Transparent pricing, real-time data, complete control. Start advertising on podcasts by visiting acast.com/advertise.
One of the most powerful examples of inclusion you've shared is the story of Club G. For listeners hearing about it for the first time, what was Club G and how did it begin?
Club G was named by the students for my son, Jess, spelled GES. And, it was revolutionary and it wasn't. So the ways in which it wasn't revolutionary is that in disability culture, there are these play groups that, when they're formed for a focused child, like my son, they would be like 6 or 8 kids. The purpose of the group would be to include Jess. And so the group is very much about the focused child, as I mentioned. So with that sort of theory in the back of my mind, after I found him by the fence and I started talking to some of the professionals we were working with, and it was actually Jess's physiotherapist, because it was all about these playground games and how they'd become faster and they had a whiff of competitiveness to them. And, at age 8 or 9, Jess wasn't able to keep up on it as he could when he was 6. And the physiotherapist said, it'd be great if the kids came up with the adaptations. And I just got it right away. And I was like, that was brilliant. So I went back to the school and I was nervous about it because, teachers are busy and they have their hands full with the academic classroom day. And this I'm asking about, recess and lunchtime. Like, hey, can we do something at recess or lunch? So I was just so grateful that the school was so open to, the possibility of this and engaging the kids. So they asked me to write a letter to the parents because they would need parent permission. So I did that. I wrote a letter and I just kind of explained what was going on for Jess and that I hoped that their child might be interested in being a part of this group. And then the school got the kids together one lunchtime when Jess wasn't there, asked them for their ideas about how they could adapt playground games. And there were 2 significant things that happened. One was the teachers were bowled over by the amount and creativeness of the adaptations that the kids were suggesting. And the number of volunteers who signed up to be a part of this club. Remember, I said 6 or 8 would have been great. 2/3 of the entire grade, so 41 kids up to 65, or I forget, but 60 some kids all said, I want to be a part of this. So then the school's challenge was around scheduling. So they needed to kind of schedule it over the 5 days and, kind of group kids in squadrons so that everybody had a meaningful role. And but other than that, the kids ran with it. It was their initiative, and it became so popular. It was Jess was in that school another 4 years, and the kind of culture of kindness and inclusion that got spread throughout the school, starting with Club G, was absolutely remarkable. Kids from other grades wanted to join. Parents heard about it and by many for the opportunities that their kids had. Because I think what happened was that Club G provided, as I mentioned earlier, this safe space for kids to be who they really were. So the naturally shy child might have the opportunity to exercise some leadership skills. Um, you know, the the ability for kids to be able to take an interpersonal risk. So to have that impulse of like feeling generous or wanting to, some kind of it's like that, and being able to act on it and be successful, I think um, offered them tremendous opportunity because when you have a chance to do small acts of kindness regularly, day in, day out, then and a habit becomes character forming. So um, I think G had an impact on many kids other than Jess.
You've said Club G wasn't really about Jess. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it was around 2012, there was a disability advocate. I think she was Australian, um, Stella Young, and she coined this term inspiration porn. And that is the idea that disability is inspiring just because I exist or just because the disability is there. And so I think we need to be careful when we talk about Club G and not say that just inspire this culture of kindness and inclusion. I don't think that is fair to Jess, to be honest, or the kids, because what happened was that it wasn't Jess himself, it was that friction that got caused between just not fitting in and the kids noticing that and then responding to that. So I think that friction, that like when there's that, cognitive dissonance or that noticing of, oh, this isn't working. What am I going to do about it? That provides a seed for something new to emerge. And I think that was what was really important about Club G.
Leads directly into another idea that's become central to your work, the concept of mattering.
Mm-hmm.
You often talked about mattering. What does that word mean to you?
Well, it's a word that I came across when I was reading some research by Gordon Flett, and he's done a tremendous amount of academic research in the area of mattering in children and adolescents. And I started to think about that in terms of disability. So, as I understand it, Malcolm Flett has two pillars. We all feel like we matter, that to ourselves and to others when we are noticed and when we are valued. So the catch-22 or double-edged or whatever phrase you want to use, the thing about disability and the thing about my son's disability is that his disability is visible. It doesn't take very long when he's in public for, I can sense that reaction from people. And so that's the notice. But then the question is he valued? And I think that that historically, like going back to when I was navigating medical systems and whatnot, I mean, that was very much, yeah, we're noticing this, but we don't value this. This is broken. This needs fixing. But when when I feel like, or just feels like matters, there's a sense of how he is in that space contributes to the course of life. And how he is in that space isn't about conformity. It's about how his uniqueness adds value to that experience. And so he matters when those two architect piece, building blocks, architecture of mapping are in place.
Why are being noticed and being valued different things?
Well, I can notice that someone is there, but whether I value it or not is a completely different thing. And I guess I could tell a story of, like, quite recently, Jess and I were in a medical waiting room, and I wasn't happy about having to take me to this appointment. Someone had canceled on me, and so it was a specialist appointment. If I didn't go, I'd be waiting months. And so I brought Jess with me, and we were in the waiting room, and he has a Android phone, and he loves to amuse himself watching YouTube videos. So he was in the waiting room, and it wasn't super loud, but it was audible. And it was some sort of a goofy cartoon. And he was holding it at kind of in both hands at chin height and kind of guffawing at this cartoon and waving back and forth and just in his chair having a good time. And um I could feel people's, like, they were trying to catch my eye, and like, as if we've all been there as a parent. Like, there are times when our kid isn't behaving or whatever, and you can just feel that wave of judgment from other people. And I was getting this wave of judgment, like, aren't you gonna, like, make him be quiet, or can't you? And I thought to myself, no, I am not doing that. He's not. He's being him in this space, and he's not, being so loud that the receptionist can't do her job. Whatever, it's fine. So I really felt that sense. He was noticed, but he was not valued. There was no, if he mattered in that scenario, they would have noticed him, and there might have been a little smile or whatever, and then go back to whatever they were doing. There would have been this feeling of acceptance that, well, yes, there's that person there. He's having a good time, and he's where he should be, kind of thing. So, I think, I mean, it's the difference between noticing and valuing, I think, is really basic to our humanity. I think about all the caregivers out there who, no matter who you're caring for, when you don't sort of fit in, um, you're visible, and when you feel that judgment from other people, it's tiring. It's you know, it's another thing for someone to carry. So, yeah.
Can someone be noticed but not matter?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I mean, to pick on that poor medical office, I mean, the story continues. then Jess and I were called into the examining room, and I brought him with me. And it was a large examining room. It could have fit 10 people plus all the equipment. And so space was not the issue, but the medical office assistant kind of looked at me with her hands on her hips and said, "He can't be in here." And, she was giving me a rule, like, this is the rule. There should only be one patient and the doctor in the examining room. And so I said, I need him with me, so I know he's safe. And she just kind of took a second and didn't know what to do with that. And then slapped my file on the counter and said, "Well, I'll have to ask the doctor," and stomped off. So, you know, he was noticed in that situation, but he didn't matter to her at all. She would have liked if he just didn't exist because he didn't fit, you know. And, I don't take things like that personally because really her reaction was not about Jess. It was not about me. It was actually not about him being in the room. It was merely the disconnect between what she expected in that situation. So oftentimes when I feel people furrowing their brows or pursing their lips at me or whatever, it's like, yeah, I know this isn't, this is what goes on in my head. I don't explain things, but it's like, yeah, I know this is unexpected, but come on, let's. So oftentimes people rise to the occasion and sometimes they don't. So,
What are the most important lessons you've learned as a parent advocate?
so when I support other parents and when I myself kind of need to go into a situation and fight my corner or fight Jess's corner with him, I I always I always try to think about, first of all, think about what is it I want to accomplish with this interaction. So, I try not to go into those interactions with feelings of, I'm going to dump my feelings because that's going to make me feel better. Because I might have a momentary feeling of like, yay, I got that off my chest. But that isn't going to accomplish a thing. In fact, that is going to send everything backwards. So until I can get into that space of like, okay, uh, what is this going to be like for the other person? And what is it I want to accomplish with this communication or this interaction? I don't start. But once I'm there, then I think about what it is that I'm hoping. I try to be curious with the other person about what our shared interests are. So, for example, with just being isolated at the playground fence, of course, I felt awful. I felt like a bad mother because I hadn't noticed this. And I could have come at the school with my guilt. And I could have, come at them with, this isn't good enough for my child. But again, that wouldn't have accomplished anything. So I try to communicate so that people can receive what I'm saying. Whenever I'm doing a workshop, I ask for a volunteer to demonstrate, and I have balled up pieces of paper. They're not going to hurt anybody, but like I said, think of your communication like a game of tossing this paper back and forth. So if I toss the paper gently, if I look at the person, if I'm like setting the paper over there so that it's possible for them to, that's what I want my communication to be like. When I am demonstrating how to do it, I do an overhand, like firing these paper balls at this person just because I want to get those balls over there. So that's a huge part of supporting and being a parent advocate. Um, what's that saying? Like, use respect to get respect. Um, you know, People who work in school systems, who work in hospitals, who work in, public sector jobs are not doing it for fame and glory and riches. They're doing it because they believe in what they're doing. And so if I can see those good intent, I can have that mindset that really influences the words I choose, and how I approach someone. So when you can do that, then you can get to a place of like, okay, what are our shared interests? So again, back to the fence. What are our shared interests? Okay, nobody wants Gus to be by himself at the fence. We want all the kids to be included and happy. So, okay, that's our shared interest. Um, and so, if you can come at it from that point of view rather than a position. So a position is something that you've thought about in advance. It's like an agenda item. Okay, Jess was at the fence. I don't want him at the fence. I want them to get a play group going the next Tuesday with Johnny, Susie, Bill and Petra. And like I've come up with the solution and we're not doing it together. So I think those are some key principles in parent advocacy.
You've never been one to settle. Stand down or stand still. You're a lifelong learner, energized by excellence. There's a fire inside you you can't ignore. You've got competition to outrun, momentum to build on, and your own high standards to meet. Stop now? Not a chance. At Capella University, we help you catch what you're chasing because you've always had the drive. Now, go earn the degree. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Being a nurse means being focused on others, on what someone else needs. To get through, to feel better, to get the job done. At Post University, our advanced nursing degree programs are focused on what you need to succeed, with 100% online classes on your schedule and monthly start dates that are ready when you are, so you can go from RN to BSN, BSN to MSN, even MSN to DNP. Ready to move your nursing career forward? Apply now at post.edu.
What role does collaboration play?
Collaboration is the most important. None of us are, I was thinking about this recently, none of us live truly independent lives. The reality is, in our 21st century world, we all, we're not off living in the forest, off grid, foraging for ourselves, being completely independent. We rely on, sewers and water and grocery stores and, roads that work. And like, so, so understanding that nothing, nothing I do is done just by me. I think is an important thing for me to always keep in my back of my mind um, that collaboration, it creates more ownership. It creates a shared sense of accomplishment when it goes well. It's community building. Um, yeah.
What advice would you give parents who feel overwhelmed?
Mm. Yes, been there, done that. Well, for me, don't try to plan at night. And don't try to solve it all at once. So breaking it down, and setting myself up so that I might be able to feel success with one small thing. And also separating out the things that I have control over and the things that I don't have control over. So, for example, in the school setting, schools have a lot of constraints. They have tight budgets, they have union contracts, they have all kinds of things that they're dealing with. So I am not going to change the teacher's contract. I'm not going to change funding formulas and suddenly have a bunch of resources for my kid. But maybe I can invite, a kid over after school, and Jess and this child will have a good time. And that will somehow make me feel good. And that will give me some energy to tackle something else that feels bigger and harder. So I think really what it's about is try to try to break down what feels overwhelming into a couple of small things that could feel like small successes that you have control over and can change. And and that will develop its own momentum.
One of your powerful messages is that inclusion isn't just good for disabled people, it's good for everyone. Why?
Um, so in a previous life, I was a businesswoman and studied business. And I learned that innovation rarely comes from the center. It rarely comes from the mainstream, never comes from doing things the same way we've always done them because this is how we do them and this is the policy and, yada, yada. Um, so, so it's important to um, include diverse ideas, opinions, ways of feeling, ways of thinking, people, because that broadens our human perspective. It broadens our potential. So I observed this time and time with Jess in elementary school, in secondary school, and as an adult with work. How back to that friction, how him not fitting into a situation created this energy that others noticed, and when they allowed that Jess and that disconnect to influence them, it led to innovative solutions to inclusion. So what I saw was ways in which all these people around Jess kept developing greater compassion, greater connection. Uh, they expressed to me tremendous appreciation for the experience. Uh, like when I was mentioning about the parents of the kids of Club G, I saw that again in high school. Jess was competing in cross country and track and field. Uh, his way of being didn't fit well with competition and with the sort of traditional paradigm of what an athlete is. And the way systems altered because people say, hey, this isn't working. And it created a tremendous feeling of community and empowerment for these other people because of justice inclusion.
What did you learn from watching Jess in his workplace, and why should businesses care about inclusion?
So Jess works, he has a full-time job in a grocery store in our neighborhood. And he takes great pride in this job of wearing the uniform and showing up and making a contribution and being helpful. Those values are very important to him. And in the produce department, he has kind of certain areas of specialty that he's practiced and he's particularly good at. And when he was first hired, this employer hadn't had any neurodivergent employees. And I could tell from the interview questions that they were asking just things that weren't, you know, can you lift 20-pound boxes? No, he can't. Can they were asking him about all the scenarios that he wasn't capable, but they hired him anyway. And they helped me of information about Jess, about how to communicate with him. We had a job coach on site with him. And when the job coach couldn't be there, I was often on site. So it was one of those times when I was on site and, hiding in an aisle a few aisles away. Jess was just fine and working independently. And I saw, like, where's a name that says, hi, my name is Jess, and I am non-speaking. Please see a coworker for further help. So coworkers kind of keep an eye on Jess as well on the floor. And in a very subtle kind of supportive way. And so, when I'd see a customer approach us, I'd also see the coworker kind of keeping Jess in their orbit. And so that was fun. And then I knew that there had been a real shift in the work culture when an accident happened. So in Jess's job, he puts boxes of produce from the back onto a metal trolley, and then he needs to take the trolley to the right part of the department. And because of his disabilities, it's hard for him at times to figure out how far he needs to swing the car out. So he's used to kind of knocking the edges of something. Pardon me. So when he accidentally knocked a customer and destabilized her, he didn't realize what had happened, and I worried that, oh, this is it. They hired him, but now they're going to fire him, blah, blah, blah. No, they adjusted the work setting for Jess so that he was working at times when it wasn't as busy. And, the store manager said to me too long ago, she said, "Oh, we just love Jess at the store." And it made me realize that this work culture had been transformed to take like what had been individualistic workflows of like, okay, employee A, you're going to do the avocados, and employee B, the lettuce, to a much sort of team-based kind of workflow. And that they were all doing for each other. So, and they value, I mean, for the manager to come up to him and say, "Oh, we just love Jess," and support him through this, this accident that happened, really showed me how, yet again, Jess, inclusion is good for everybody,
Hmm. Why is storytelling such a powerful tool for changing hearts and minds?
Well, stories are our original way of sharing information And I know for me, I always kind of remember things more when there's a personal story that goes with it. And I think that sharing stories speaks to, you know, a deep motivation in us as human beings to understand larger questions, to find connections in our experience that link to other people. And I think that stories have a profound way of, or can have a very profound way of sharing those deeper insights and connections.
Why do stories work better than statistics?
They're more interesting. um, yeah, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I do not respond well when I feel like I'm being lectured at, or I'm being told, this is the way how I see the world, and don't you want to see the world the same way as me? Um, I I'll almost have an opposite reaction to that. Like, no, I don't want what you're selling. Um, and in terms of statistics, you know, I think we get so much information in this digital age, and it's easy for me to feel overwhelmed with, you know, bits of information and statistics and numbers and, you know, like, I think, you know, telling you that 25% of North Americans over the age of 15 have a disability has far less impact than sharing the story of what it felt like to see my 8-year-old kid at the playground fence. Um, and I would rather hear those stories from others.
How has sharing your family story impacted others? And what stories do we need more of?
Hmm. Well, you know, in some ways, it's hard for me to say how sharing my story has impacted others, um, except to say I do have people tell me from time to time that they, especially, um, you know, when I talk about mattering, or I talk about um, some way of seeing disability, like I've seen people's faces when I'm like, well, disability is not a tragedy in a body. Disability is created by you and me, our interactions, um, and and so, like, those kinds of things definitely have an impact on people, and people have said to me or written to me or commented on things that I've written that it meant something to them. So, as a writer, that's the gold. That's all I care about. If I've touched someone's heart, then my job is done.
Mhm. If listeners remember only one thing from this conversation, what do you hope it is?
Well, I think I think we've really, as a society, have been caught up in this performance paradigm, that value somehow is equated to earning money in a capitalist society and being, you know, economically successful. And and I think that we're starting, you know, without getting too broad, but I think we're starting to see how that is, capitalism is not serving us, and how that mentality of, you know, be the fittest, be the brightest, be the whatever, um, is not serving us globally as a as humanity. And so I think that, performance isn't about conformity. Performance is about contributing our unique rhythms to the course of life. And I guess it comes back to that notion of mattering, that we all need to feel like we're noticed, valued.
What's one thing someone can do this week to help another person feel that they matter?
Smile at them. When you see someone in a community and it's not quite what you expect, find a welcoming response somewhere inside you, whether it's a smile, whether it's a little comment, those small acts, I'll call them random kindness, but you never know what someone else is dealing with, and you never know what your generous response could mean to someone else.
My final question: what does true belonging look like to you?
True belonging, I think, is a feeling. And it's a feeling that Jess, me, you, anyone can be who they want to be in any space. And that's okay.
When you need a snack that keeps up, reach for Roller Bites. Packed with protein and stacked with bold flavors like tequila lime, Monterey Jack, and Buffalo Ranch. These compact handheld snacks are built for busy days and nonstop schedules, delivering satisfying bites without slowing you down. No prep, no pause, just real flavor and real fuel in every roll. Find them at your nearest convenience store or see them on tour. Visit rollerbites.com for dates, locations, and more.
You've never been one to settle. Stand down or stand still. You're a lifelong learner, energized by excellence. There's a fire inside you you can't ignore. You've got competition to outrun, momentum to build on, and your own high standards to meet. Stop now? Not a chance. At Capella University, we help you catch what you're chasing because you've always had the drive. Now, go earn the degree. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
While every other channel is fighting for your customers' attention, podcasts are where they've already given it. No one accidentally listens to a podcast for 45 minutes. They choose to be here. They trust the voice in their ears, and when that voice talks about your brand, it doesn't sound like advertising. It sounds like a recommendation from a friend. Acast gives you that trust at scale. Digital precision, host-read authenticity, and performance data that proves it worked. Don't fight for attention. Buy it with Acast. Learn more by visiting acast.com/advertise.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Would you like to mention anything about your work or advocacy?
Well, first of all, thank you, Paul. It's been such fun talking about these things that are near and dear to my heart. And I spend a lot of time thinking about these things and writing about these things. And you can read some of my writing on my website.
Okay, so we'll put them all in our show notes. And thank you so much for being on the show. And it was nice talking to you.
It was a real pleasure, Paul. Thank you so much. And thank you to your listeners.
Before we finish, Carmen has a special gift for our listeners. She's generously offering the first chapter of her forthcoming memoir as a free download. If today's conversation about disability belonging, and mattering resonated with you. I encourage you to download it using the link in the show notes. It's a moving introduction to the experiences that shaped the insights you've heard today. And I know you'll enjoy reading it. As we wrap up today's conversation with Carmen, I keep coming back to one powerful idea. Disability is not a tragedy housed within a person. It's often created or dismantled through the ways we choose to interact with one another. Carmen's journey with Jess challenges us to rethink what inclusion really means. Not as an act of charity, but as an act of community. Not as helping someone fit in, but as creating spaces where everyone belongs. Her story reminds us that being noticed is not the same thing as being valued. And when people feel both noticed and valued, they experience something we all need: a sense of mattering. If there's one takeaway I hope you carry with you, it's this: every person you meet is fighting a battle you may never see. A smile, a moment of curiosity, a willingness to make room for difference. Those small acts can change someone's experience of the world. Pause, reflect, and notice your lens. Growth doesn't require perfection. It requires awareness. And awareness practiced daily becomes change. We don't move culture forward through outrage alone. We move it forward through conversation, through humility, and through the courage to see one another more fully. Thank you for choosing curiosity. Thank you for choosing reflection. Thank you for choosing to keep building a more inclusive world. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep celebrating the beauty of diverse minds. Thanks for listening to the Neurodiversity Voices Podcast. This is the Neurodiversity Voices Podcast, and we'll continue the conversation next time.